Hi, this is Keith Townsend, and you're listening to episode 10 of Virtualized Geeks Tech Talks. Today is April the 22nd, I believe, and if my memory serves me correctly, today is the last day to get your vExpert applications in. So if you're interested in that at all, hey, you probably missed it if you're listening to this on the 23rd or after. There's always next year. I don't know if my application will get accepted or not, but the guy that runs it over at VMware, John Troyers, promises us that the standard isn't so high to get into the program, and I'm all for low standards. Uh, but actually, speaking of John Troyer, tonight's podcast is actually a little bit less virtualization focused and probably a little bit less tech focused, and it's more on blogging and social media. So I got a pretty interesting notice from WordPress today. Today is my 3-year anniversary of setting up my WordPress account. I'm almost certain that I set it up specifically to comment on a blog post about unemployment benefits because roughly about 3 years ago, I was looking for work. I had gotten laid off from a job, and I was looking at retooling myself and potentially getting my VCP, which I got a couple of weeks ago. So I'm only 3 years late getting it. And I created a WordPress account specifically to comment on a blog post. And that kind of led me to considering blogging. The other kind of curious event that kind of brought about today's topic was that John Troyer and a couple of people, someone from Cisco, someone from EMC, run a podcast called Geek Whispers that's actually geared towards enterprise social media employees. So people who are specifically in the enterprise and their role is around social media and kind of trumpeting the cause of their enterprises on social media, especially around tech. And the topic was about guys like me or people like John, Amy, Mark that have a big social media presence. I don't know if I have so much of a big social media presence. Virtualized Geek has kind of plateaued a little bit when it comes to readership, but I've had a coworker tell me that I'm famous because he saw my blog about a year ago. So I guess I have somewhat of an impact. But the topic of the podcast was pretty interesting. It was how do you balance kind of your blogging and social media presence with your presence in the enterprise. One of the things that I've specifically stayed away from, especially the past couple of years as I've worked for fairly large organizations that can be a little bit weary of social media in general, is that I haven't published who I work for as part of my Twitter handle. If you look at my LinkedIn profile as part of that, I think that makes sense, and that's easier for the type of corporations that I've worked for in the past to digest that. I self-identify who I work for on my About page on Virtualized Geek. But outside of that, I don't want the corporate types coming to me and saying, and kind of policing my content. So I kind of disassociate, especially my Twitter handle, with what I do daily as an everyday job. Because specifically, I don't want to deal with the hassle of someone telling me that they don't like my content, even though I have, that whole disclaimer that posts are on. But the bigger thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of the risk reward of blogging and having a large social media presence. As I said, about 3 years ago, I was unemployed looking for work, and I took the plunge into starting Virtualized Geek. Took a lot of time to find an available domain name that I liked. I look back at it. I look at my domain registry, and I actually have quite a few domain names registered. One was actually VirtualizedGeek, which I decided not to pursue because I wanted more of a neutral um, from a technology perspective. If I wanted to pivot away from virtualization specifically, which is what I have done, uh, the handle kind of still made sense, and I could pivot the blog away from just virtualization topics and talk about enterprise infrastructure, consulting, management consulting, whatever it was that's technology related. And I took the plunge, selected a domain name, and started blogging. It took a really long time to kind of build up equity with you guys. The couple of you that kind of religiously read the blog, who listen to these podcasts, probably for the past year or so, you guys have been a really great audience. You've interacted well with me. I appreciate it. But career-wise, it's really been a boon for me career-wise. You can practice. I mean, honestly, you can Google me. If you look for virtualization SMEs or virtualization experts, my name will hopefully come up within the next couple of, within one or two Google search pages. That's a big deal to me. I don't consider myself a virtualization expert. I consider myself an infrastructure technology expert in general. Virtualization just seems to be a hot topic. I know a decent amount about it, especially for my career level as a architect type role. It's a very critical skill set to have. But by no means do I consider myself a expert. A lot of you guys that listen to the podcast and read the blog, I most definitely defer to you guys from a technical perspective. I really do understand it from an architectural perspective, and I'm willing to take the risk and put myself out there and put the readings out there. There's been times where you guys have slapped my hand and told me that I'm wrong from a technical perspective or from a philosophical perspective. But for the most part, it's served its purpose, and I've gotten my name out there. If I ever do decide to look for another job, the fact that I'm known from VirtualizedGeek.com is a advantage. But it is a risky thing. You know, when you put your name out there, you open yourself up to potential criticism. You have to make sure that you're right. Me, not so much. So I kind of shoot from the hip. It takes me just a few minutes to do most of my blog posts. If I'm not too comfortable about the material, I probably won't post it. But for the most part, I shoot from the hip and let you guys critique me and correct me if I'm wrong. I have no problems with that. So it's worked out well for me. So I kind of want to get some feedback. You know, a couple of you guys I've specifically called out. Personally, you know, I've reached out to you guys and asked you to start blogging yourselves, potentially start a podcast, or even be a guest of this Virtualized Geek podcast. I'm toying with the idea of doing a Google Hangout and posting that as a potential future podcast. But I am very interested to know what reasons either that you've chosen to podcast or chosen to have a big social media presence, or chosen not to either do either of those things, or including blogging. And if you have chosen to do so, I'd like to hear your feedback. You know, have you kept at it? A couple of you guys I followed. Some of you guys have put out some really great content, but been quiet for the past year. Have you found the balance? I highly recommend listening to the Geek Whisperers podcast. It's geek-whisperers.com. Really great, informative podcast, especially for those of us who are interested in increasing our social media presence as well as blogging. Really great content on just marketing ourselves as techs. Look forward to continuing the podcast. I'm really appreciative to the one or two people that view this week, and I'll keep posting it until WordPress tells me I'm out of bandwidth. Talk to you guys next week.